the French, the first speaker to speak according to the program, could not be present today. So I will make a short summary of his paper after Christian's paper, since both will be related. Christian's paper is about nature and human in Sino-Vietnamese conceptions and practices. He's a researcher at the CNRS, that is the National Institute of Research. But before him, our first speaker will be Marie-Amélie Pando, who will, I don't introduce her more because you have everything on the slide. I request the speakers to speak not more than 20 minutes, like in any other session, so that we have a lot of space for discussion. And Marie, the floor is yours.
So, it was a flooding that resulted from the Koshi affluent-bound bridge in Nepal in August 2008, which pushed me to study this region. Since the rise of the Himalayan ranges, the Himalayan rivers have routinely caused extensive flooding in Nepal, Bihar, eastern Uttar Pradesh, and Bengal. Floods, in fact, they are a source of fertility for agricultural land, but they are also a vector of destruction. We know that the dynamics of the flood depend on the physical conditions of the sectors today. In my area of study, the powerful momentum is generated by the largest vertical drop in the world. It is densification of populations that often controls development of space. Infrastructures, in fact, mediate between societies and their environments. This infrastructure, of course, exists in society and often embody, reflect, and in turn shape their political, economic, and social surroundings. Humans have relied on water management infrastructure since the dawn of civilizations. Dams, river control constructions, and water delivery canals were important objects of state activity in ancient Egypt as in China or in Mesopotamia. Since the revival of hydraulic societies at the turn of the 19th centuries, the management of floods and frequent movement of the riverbed are often the focus of positivist hydraulic development known as flood control. The specific conditions of a site always require adapted facilities which should respect the natural environment and the human occupation. The problematic concerning this sector emerges from the opposition between the will of a capitalistic hydraulics and the increase of the socio-territorial vulnerability. As can be seen in this picture, the theoretically protected zone in Nepal is completely submerged, devastated by the bridge that happened on the 18th August 2008. It happened approximately 12 kilometers upstream from the Bhimnagar barrage, and it was unlike that of any flood that has been associated with the Koshi in more than 60 years. It was unique because of the location of its epicenter and extent. For the first time, an earthen levee located in Nepal breached spilling waters into the area that have not experienced Koshi-related floods in nearly 100 years. The impacts were so enormous because the area at a distance of embankments, which benefits the most from flood protection, has developed increased built-up infrastructures and high population density free from flood since more than 6 decades. So we should wonder what could be the reason of this situation. We can already apprehend two main dimensions. First, the choice of development is not adapted to the region of the watercourse second, there is a loss of presence of the population installed next. So now let's have a look on the geography of the sector to understand the dynamics at play. The Koshi Basin extends over two opposite geographical entities. Upstream and to the north, the Himalayan Massif. Downstream and to the south, the Ganges Plain. The Koshi is a transnational river starting its journey from the Tibetan plateau occupied by China, then goes through the high Himalayan range and pass through the plain in Nepal before entering India and join the Ganga at Koshala in Qatar district in the Bihari state. So you have to imagine that in only 160 kilometers of distance as the crow flies, it moves more than 8,800 meters to 60 meters in Nepal. So it's probably one of the highest hydraulic gradients in the world. Therefore, the physical environment, illustrated by a high contrast between mountain and plain, generates a sudden loss of velocity which releases a large sediment load in the plain. Tectonic forces on the Himalayan ranges that are in the nascent stage of their formation are elevating Koshi's gradient by 1 centimeter per year, aggravating erosion, inundation, and sedimentation. The annual sediment load of the Koshi is estimated as 100 million cubic meters. As Deepak Gyawali told me more than once, in Koshi, water is co-equal passenger with matter. This is one of the fundamental characteristics of the river behavior, emblematic of the Himalayan rivers. Moreover, due to the powerful effect of the monsoon there is a great variability of the clouds, which can pass from a low water level of 280 cubic meters per second to a maximum in high water of 26,000 cubic meters per second, which represents an increase of 93 times the minimum flow. We can see on this map a number of paleochannels of the Koshi in the plain, showing its migratory behavior. The river has typically graded in nature and has formed a colossal alluvial fan-shaped catchment due to the large sediment supply from the Himalaya. This is one of the world's largest conical alluvial fan, extending over 15,000 square kilometers. The Koshi has attracted the attention of many people due to our shifting nature, so it was mapped at an early time. So between the 1730s and 1950s, the Koshi moved laterally west of 115 kilometers. So on this slide you can see a huge upper basin of the Koshi compared to the reception cone. That is the largest watershed in Nepal, and it's widely spread in the middle Himalayan. After a narrow passage at the exit of the massif, it extends again on a much smaller alluvial fauna in the form of a delta. This geographic layout can be seen as partly responsible for the legendary flooding of the area, because as we can see, there is not enough space on the delta to accommodate the enormous flow. In the Terai, a thin strip of lowland at the foothill of the Himalayas, the study area, mainly focused in Sunsara district in Nepal, is located in the eastern part of the plain and extends at the northern part of Bihar in India. The Nepalese Terai, plain in a mountainous country, represents only 17% of the Nepalese territory, but shelters 54% of the Nepalese population in 2011. In 1951, when Nepal opens to the world, this territory already included 35% of the population. Also left at the margin by the past, this density shows the importance of this space for the Nepali state. This growth demonstrates the strategic status of this space for the Nepali state, where most of its economic activity is realized. Moreover, the Tehran is the outlet of the 6,000 Nepalese Himalayan rivers, largely flooding the plain during the monsoon. Admittedly, sheet flooding was a nuisance to cultivators, but at least they understood it. The depth of the floodwaters, their duration, etc. They prepared for it and could deal with it. It was simply a part of the annual cycle of their lives. In fact, before the advent of the embankments, the monsoon months were a time of celebration. The people coexisted with the rivers and their floods. Floods have become a major problem after the British occupation of the subcontinent. The colonial British government has developed a flood control strategy in Orissa in order to extract more revenues from the land via taxes, according to Rohan D'Souza, an historian at Delhi Jawaharlal Nehru University. This measure made it possible to begin the transition from a flood-dependent agrarian system to the capitalist and colonial world that wanted to increase yields. In 1850, they undoubtedly undertook one of their most ambitious projects, with the containment of a part of the Damodar River in northeastern India to protect a railroad track. But the problems did not take long to emerge. The embankments kept breaking, causing great loss. The system had to be completely dismantled only a decade after its establishment. Therefore, they were reluctant to try to tame the Himalayan rivers. In the face of increasing flood-related problems, with the development of infrastructures also, and embankments, railway, roads, and the beginning of the demographic transition, the hydraulic enthusiasm gradually began to weaken. The debate over whether Koshi and other rivers should be dammed is more than 100 years old. As early as 1883, the British colonial government feared that Koshi might make a sudden change of direction and return to one of its former channels. William Hinglis, who was responsible for surveying the region, commented, "It was not advisable to make any attempt to interfere with the natural flow of the river." After the independence of India, the Tennessee Valley Authority became the model for flood control in the country, bringing up the idea of multi-purpose river valley development so that the Project Koshi could be launched. This model claimed that science and technology were neutral and could revive the national economy. So the hydraulic development of the Koshi plan, decided in 1954 after a long centenary debate, extends over two states, India and Nepal, and concerns the border dam, embankments, and canals. Most of these structures are located on Nepalese territory, but paradoxically, the management depends on India. It is important to note that the population are not suited for its facilities and their management. In addition, infrastructure monitoring and maintenance remain marginal. This results in significant impact on the environment and population. The character of the floods changed, and with it a change in the people's lifestyle. They underwent a change in nomenclature from being flood worshippers to flood victims. The floods that occurred following the construction of the embankment wreaked havoc on the countryside. Prior to the embankments, people coped with the floods rather than falling victim to them. While this shift in attitude toward the floods was a qualitative change in the embankment period. In 1954, before construction on the state system of embankments was initiated, approximately 2.5 million hectares of land in northern Bihar, completion of the state's embankments, the flood-prone area increased to 6.89 million hectares. The flood-prone area has increased then by 275%. All one need to do is consult the topographic map of Bihar to see that the flood-prone area is now nearly conterminous with the area the government says is protected. In Bihar, many people speak of green caused by these policies. Instead of the embankment stopping the flood, they have exacerbated and complexified them. More land has been lost to embankment-related processes than were ever lost to overcultivation. The primary problems include, first, the rapid buildup of silt, sand, and gravel and stone in the riverbeds, increased height of the mean water level of the rivers, elevation that over time have become significantly higher than the surrounding floodplain by as much as 4 or 5 meters. Third, increased waterlogging, fourth, scoring of the earthen embankments and catastrophic breaches. Today, as a result of a socio-economic and political legacy coupled with the consequences of the state's embankment and flood policy, Bihar has become the least progressive state in the Union. This is sad comment, especially in light of the fact that at one time Bihar was perceived as being agriculturally, economically, and politically a national leader and a state to be emulated. Each year, the Water Resources Department issues reports on the number of breaches that occur in the embankments. Since 1953, there have been hundreds of breaches of varying sizes. Each year, the breaches carry the risk of greater human miseries for each subsequent bridge being at a higher water level than in previous year. Thus, the flood control measures have made the land and the people more vulnerable, and more than ever, they depended on structures to protect them from the increasingly intense floods. As a result, in case of breakage, the consequences of a rupture are long-lasting and enormous, because after the recession of flood water, the territories occupied just below the embankment were then completely devastated with the deposition on the arable lands of around 12 meters of gravel, sand, and sediments, calling into question the livelihood of the population in the next 3 decades in Nepal. So upstream you can see the bridge in Nepal in Kusha, and downstream you can see the extent in Bihar. So where the facilities adapted to the site discretionary calls into question the investment made and still going on. So it can be noted that there are different types of floods that result from the implementation of flood control measures. So let's examine the case of 2 tributaries of the Koshi in Nepal. Tilati is an exceptional case in Terai, as it is an ancient, well-developed cultural center with a rich social life composed mainly of Brahmin Madhesi population. An embankment perpendicular to the flood was built by India at the border into no man's land in 1972. Since then, the Khyber River, a seasonal river, diverted to Koshi in the east, is flooding the area during its floods that turn it into long-lasting floods. So there is a dam. The dam effect brings lots of sand sedimentation due to a border dike and upstream deforestation that is going on since more than 150 years. Destruction of agricultural soils by water stagnation and silting, and as you can see on this picture, there is an elevation of 8 meters in only 30 years of the sedimentation. In the face of Nepal's efforts to protect land and people that are totally inoperative, dam built hastily at the beginning of the 2013 monsoon, as Lucan told us, it was meant just before the end of the financial year, is washed away by the first rains. But local people built the cost-effective embankment that holds the entire monsoon. So we can see that locals know their environment. Those who depend on the embankments have a much greater vested interest in them than the government-paid inspectors. The local population sees day-to-day changes in the embankments that may not be apparent during infrequent inspection visits. External management reviews to be inadequate for the setting and drainage, and flooding problems increase. Likewise, while the professional processes involved in embankment breaches or waterlogging. It is a cultivator in the field adjacent to the embankment that knows from experience what is actually taking place, even if it is only on a small plot of land. Failure to include the people in the decision-making process eliminates input from those who will be most directly affected by those projects. They should have at least a say in what happened to them. Since 2004, in Kilati, the people refused the traditional relief post-flood given by the state. They are asking for a sustainable solution. J'ai presque fini, hein. Il y en a plus volonté, j'en suis. Please, please. Okay. Some developments create dam. Okay. Here we are on the west side of the Koshi, on the Tsunsari River. That was an old channel out of the Koshi. And as you can see on this picture, the people have reached the canal of irrigation because in 2010 an embankment was built on their side, and so the water got trapped. The land water got trapped, and they were in the water for more than a month, so they had to bridge the irrigation canal. Consequences on the So you have lots of consequences on the land. There is sterilization, that's called the impact of flood, either by sand or by sedimentation, or also by evaporation on the waterlogged zone, generating salinization of the grounds. So we observe a loss of agricultural yields and a lack of food for human and livestock. Pauperization, from where migration, there is a loss of livelihood. The geography of risk in the Koshi plain reflects a geography of power. We know that the purpose of protection construction is to develop land. We know that the protection are installed firstly near the land of the property owners. We observe that the construction of embankments tends to dispossess the most vulnerable people for lack of compensation and for the weakening of their land. The poorest without land settle on the free sector, thus exposed to the influences of the flood. This is particularly the case between the embankments of Koshi. The protection policy has the effect of exacerbating social inequalities by valuing protected lands and depreciating those that are not. This infrastructure thus contributes to the partition of the social group between the owner and the others. On this picture, we can see a correlation between correlation and spatialization of risk that clearly emerges. Impoverishment makes people more vulnerable. So the powerful build hard and resistant and out of reach of floods. The poor settle in the most exposed sector with precarious construction, sometimes in the riverbed. Inadaptation of facility. Ah ouais? Moi, c'était la production. Si, parce que ça c'est important. So the facilities of the infrastructure do not meet the standard and therefore they are quickly weakened. Quality monitoring and maintenance do not receive the necessary attention and this adjustment quickly become obsolete. Why? Designers recover a portion of the funding on their own behalf, imitated by the contractors and the policies that commission the work. So, we fall into a circuit of malfunction that can be described as corruption under the name of Iron Triangle, which is a significant annual rent for actors. The result is a mechanism of clientelism that makes population dependent on their representatives. The latter, to protect themselves, are associated with mafia groups that turn patronage into law. As a consequence of their built-in fragility, Tremont uses the embankment. The only people benefiting from their construction and maintenance are the laborers, contractors, engineers, and politicians who each have a vested interest in their ongoing upkeep or repairs of the inevitable breaches. with each bridge or the letting of a maintenance contract, each of the Vestas battery participate in the making of a never-ending cash cow. This corruption mechanism spreads to all decision centers, whether local or national. We are thus witnessing the establishment of a power in Russian dolls to know that India dominated Nepal by imposing border dams in violation of international agreements. The power of Kathmandu imposes its development to the poor Madhesi population to the benefit of a powerful minority. Local authorities imposes on local population their law. It's a neo-feudal system. All these powers feed into each other and reinforce the domination of the powerful over a population that is impoverished. So to conclude, okay, so you can read the slide. I will not have 5 seconds to do it. That's okay. That's the same thing I was going to say. So thank you for your attention.
Christian will follow the rule of the 20 minutes. I will talk about the Vietnamese conception of practice and nature, and not only to understand them or describe them, but also to try to ask how we can study some conception and practice of nature different than the Western one. And you will see there is many issues with this kind of question. Now first, in Vietnam, the study of conceptual practice of nature, they are very, very new. There is almost no research about that. We have only some ethnobotanists try to understand the conception of flower and trees in Vietnam, because the same in Thailand, we have some kind of sacred trees. We don't have the same ordination with the monk, but we have some trees impossible to cut, even in the city. But the majority of research, they've come from the natural science and technical approaches. And it's been the social science are not very active to produce something about the nature in Vietnam. And when we have the study, usually they are not focusing on the local perception. The social dimension is very, very low, and of course the symbolic dimension is usually missing completely. But in the other side, all the law and regulation organized by states and by international agency, the same the European Union, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, all of them, they are based on the Western model of regulation. There is no regulation even to manage a natural area protected or national park can integrate the local practice or local custom. This means as an anthropologist, I meet a big gap and contradiction between the local conception and the tools, the methodology we had to understand, to study, and also to manage and control this kind of practice. And this presentation will try to show some contradiction and hope, try to find some solution. And my way to approach this problem is an anthropological one, but I need to get back in the history, because the Vietnam is a particular case where we have a long Chinese colonization for more than 1,000 years, can bring to Vietnam many conceptions of religion, science, politics, administrative system from China. And after that, we'll see also there is the French influence during around 100 years.
and also my data come from the empirical anthropology. It's been spent a lot of time in the fieldwork with a farmer, with the local authority, and the way to try to understand how they think the road around them. And it's not an easy question, because usually we avoid this kind of question. We think only natural culture is very easy to understand, but when we go deep, you will see there is many complex information. And the third one, the third part, is to try to understand how we have in Vietnam and when we have another place, especially in the Western science, and try to understand how Vietnam is a position to have a hybrid ontology. It's been the place can mix the original one, Vietnamese one, the Chinese one, some the French one during the French Revolution, and what is the ontology today in this kind of a mixed system. Just to bring back you to the history, in the long history of Vietnam, we have different steps. The first one will be before the Chinese colonization. We don't know exactly what was the action and the belief and the social system in Vietnam, because this time it was not history, it was prehistory, because the Vietnamese start to write with the Chinese system. After we have 1,000 years of the Chinese colonization, and this is the time of the mixity between Chinese and Vietnamese. After we have a few hundred years where the Vietnamese kingdom get its autonomy from China, but they keep strong contact with China. Majority of the Mandarin and the public servants get training in China during this period, even if the Vietnam was independent. At the end of 19th century, the French colonization come to Vietnam, and they introduced the idea of the state, of the modern science, of modern medicine, and all of that, they are integrated in the Vietnamese system of action and thinking today. And after to the last period is something special, because the development of Marxist-Leninism in Vietnam can be analyzed as an extreme naturalism. It's an extreme position of the power of the human being on the nature, with the political focus to develop the society, the communist society. And this kind of system, the nature is only a tool. And since 1986, we come to the new communist way. Vietnam followed China after a few years for renovation, and we have a new introduction of the liberal economy in the system. And of course, liberal economy can have some deep impact in the conception of nature and the management environment. Now, this is the same information, but as you can see, we have a superposition. It's been every time Vietnam is a particular case to keep something from the past and to add a new structure every time. And for example, just a practical example, in Vietnam, when you have a contract for everything, contract with a business, contract with university, you sign the paper. But for many people, the paper, there is no meaning. The meaning is because we know face to face, I trust you, I know you, and for this reason, the contract is efficient. This is exactly the practice before the state can control all the relation between people or group. In Vietnam, we have a solution of different kind of system. Working together in different parts can be in contradiction, can be in working the same way. Now we come in the action of human and the non-human in Vietnam. The first one is to show how the division between human and non-human is non-working in Vietnam. In Vietnam, it's very difficult to protect some animals because they have a high value for food or for medicine. And the division between food and medicine in Vietnam is not clear. It's been every time when you eat something, You think, I eat these kind of things because it's hot. It's hot in the system of classification, hot, cold. Because the time is the morning, I can eat that. In the evening, I can eat that. Because the moon is like that, you know. And the food and medicine, they are really connecting together, even today in the urban population. This is exactly the principle of exchange and balance between human and non-human quality in the Chinese or Vietnamese medicine. And I make Chinese and Vietnamese medicine separately, because in Vietnam today we have 3 systems of medicine. The Chinese one, Vietnamese one, and the Western one. And people can choose for this problem, I want to make this one. In my opinion, I don't know if they can mix together, but for sure, depend on the problem, you can find more in this one, more in this one, and depend also your connection with the expert. If you have a very good friend, is a Chinese doctor, maybe you will go more with the Chinese medicine. Just this slide can show us the human people can integrate non-human power and quality. And it's the reason why the bones of tiger or the liver of bear is so expensive in Vietnam. Just for information, the last Asian rhinoceros in Vietnam was killed 6 years ago in National Park. We go to other side, the relation human and non-human. Usually, in the wilderness belief, as it's strong in America, we think the nature is the place where the human don't have any action. But in Vietnam, it's very different. For many farmers, for example, in the Red River Delta is the area, the rural area, with the higher density of population all over the world. We are 1,200 people per kilometer in rural area. This means the density is crazy. And in this place, for the farmer, the nature is not the mountain or national park, it's the garden. Because since many generations, they collect plants, flowers, trees, everything, and they grow around the house or around the pagoda. This means for them, the real nature is around the house and built by themselves step by step. And this idea is have a strong connection with the notion of Satoyama in Japan. Satoyama is the double concept of Sato means village garden, Yama means mountain. It means in the same place we can have village and mountain, and for Japanese, conception is a real place to produce and to protect biodiversity. Not the short part of this means that the human have the capacity in certain conditions to create the nature, but they are also part of this nature. And that is very complex to analyze how you can build something when you are part of the thing you are building. Just a picture of the landscape in the mountain in Vietnam for the village and the ethnic groups. People, they don't have the clear conscience of the Satoyama concept, of course, but in the practice of them, they are completely connecting with the nature. You see the forest come in the garden come in the forest. And we have this kind of balance between nature, architecture, and garden. But for the government, this kind of village is a very backdate. We need to change them. You know the roof? The roof is in the palm trees. It's not clean. You need to make something more modern, some kind of metallic roof or fibrocement roof. This means there is many projects in Vietnam to stop the ethnic group to use the local material to build a house. Now, from just what you say, my observation is Western modern science with many limits. When we want to describe the people, can integrate non-human part and can create a nature. And this is a full part of the everyday life and the cosmology of local people. You know, when you are anthropologist or geographer or sociologist, it's very difficult to describe a situation where people don't make the clear difference between human and non-human. You say when people they make at home, for example, they make a plate with a cigarette for the grandfather to give food for him for every day. And that is very strange to describe. And when you have some animals, for example, during the Vietnam history, some elephants, they have the military rank, and we have some observation. Some people, they have less rank than the elephant, they fight the elephant, and they go in the front of the court, and they lose, because in the army it's forbidden to overuse the power in the different rank. This means you can have the elephant can have more power in the army than some soldier. And that is asked the question, this means who they are. They are animals, they are soldiers, they are members of the army, they can win in the front of the court. You know, this kind of question is very difficult to manage. But lucky for us, we have some researchers, they try to help us to question the diversity of way of thinking, the relation nature and non-human. Human and non-human, sorry, or subject or object. The first one, maybe the more everybody know him, probably the more famous, is Philippe Descola, which is after I will describe that in more details. He make a division of 4 different kind of ontology all over the world, and the Western one is called naturalist ontology. Also, Bruno Latour talk about the Western way of thinking as a specific universalism. This means Western think is universalism, but it's only one universalism. It's not for everything, only for the Western country. And Auguste Imbert, a French geographer working in Japan, he talked about the modern ontological topos to show the Western modern science doesn't have enough tools to describe other culture. This means this, we call this kind of theoretical group, ontological term, they open the door for the non-standard, non-Western, exotic ontologies. And it's what I want to talk with you today. Just to, maybe many of you know already this, Philippe Descola is very famous. His approach is interesting because he tried to find the structure. He's a post-structuralist. Huh? He takes the chair of Collège de France from Claude Lévi-Strauss. This means he followed the same kind of way, trying to find the general way of thinking for the human being. This means for us, we will just focus on the naturalism in Western countries and analogism in China and Vietnam. This is the short design of how the Western science think the world. Culture on the top. I can put on the top of human being, there is God, of course, there's a connection with God. Because human is close to God, it's been nature is under. But the question is how human and nature can have connection. And you see, one side is clear, use the abuse or protection. The other side, what's the relation between nature and human being? The right of nature? Many questions. To make short, in this system, nature is an object distinct from the human. From the Sino-Vietnamese general connection, we call analogism, or the specialist of China, Matthew, in 2017, called homologism, but it's not so different. But as you see, the human and non-human, they are not disconnecting. They are part of the big system. And the question is how they can be in relation. And nature is not an object, it's a process. It's doing something, it's changing something. When we make comparison, I think in the first part of the schema, we can ask how we can connect human and non-human, and non-human and human. And the other one, the question in red under, is everything can be connecting with everything. But the connection need to follow some hierarchy and some order. And non-human is very large conception. Can include animals, plants, spirit, dead peoples, breath, qi in China, the vital energy, natural elements, everything. Almost everything can be inside. This means if you make a visual thing, it looks something like that. You see, very different than the opposition nature and culture. And I think because this complexity is the reason why we don't have enough tools to describe this situation. Alors my conclusion with many questions. The first is how social science can study the relation between human and non-human. And of course, we need to include the vision of the human stakeholders. And that is a big problem in social science. Second question, how can describe and understand this kind of relation without clarifying the relation with human and human as an irrational belief? Because when we talk irrational, we talk with a hierarchy. We think the rational is superior than irrational. But when we think about that, even if we don't try that, we exclude from the study all the metaphysics. And that is a big problem when you want to study the relation between human and non-human. And the last question, when you want to study this kind of relation, we must focus also on the role of the affect and the feelings. And this is also one of the blind points of social science. If you listen in this conference for 2 days, we never, almost maybe 1 or 2 times, talk about the affect or the sensation or feelings. It's still strange. I think the one possibility to be more able to describe the relation between human and non-human is try to design a project, not only with the local researcher, but also with local population. It's been to integrate, for example, local knowledge in the more academic science. And the second option is to have a critical attitude with the Western modern science, because the domination of the Western ideology in economy, technology, and science is everywhere, all over the world. And the last possibility is to connect the political ecology. And what just I explained for you is the anthropology of nature. Thank you for your attention.
So I will try to replace the missing speaker, Frédéric Bourdier, by summarizing in 5 minutes only his paper, who to some extent gives an excellent example, concrete example. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I will try to summarize what Frédéric Bourdier had prepared for his paper. And it's an interesting paper, I think, because it provides an excellent example, concrete example of what Christian just explained. This paper is called Nature Reshaped, Diffracted Political Engagements for Recovering Grabbed Land in Cambodia. Quite briefly, Frédéric recalls that Cambodia has become an Eldorado for investors and agro-industrial companies. But if it is an Eldorado for companies, it's not an Eldorado for indigenous people who are losing their land especially the islands. This process takes place because of the granting of economic land concessions by the government, which is a way to attract foreign direct investments. And in particular, the demand for rubber from Vietnam has spurred an agro-industrial corporate culture in the northeastern part of the kingdom, where a majority of indigenous people live. So there is a strong power-knowledge imbalance between the indigenous peoples and the outsiders, the firms, and between the two parties, external actors, namely NGOs and transnational activists, propose their services to support the cause of the deprived inhabitants. So that's why Frédéric studied in the Ratnagiri area. He was living as an anthropologist in that place since 1994, and he was wondering whether the nature of the intervention of these external actors coincides with what the so-called vulnerable people did expect. Put more simply, on which basis a collective strategy had been jointly formulated, if any, and did a planned action designed by the aid industry, was it careful enough to take into account the main socio-cultural and territorial concerns expressed by local communities? Finally, did both parties really share similar objectives? So the example is a private Vietnamese enterprise that was granted 20,000 hectares by the Cambodian government for growing rubber trees in a territory that was inhabited by 5 indigenous groups in 14 villages. There was a lot of confrontation, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent resistance by grassroots social movements, but with limited results. So after some time, in 2013, a coalition of 5 international and national NGOs came with the intention to support the defenseless villagers. But rather than reactivating the grassroots movement or proposing alternative forms of active resistance, as it has been done in Brazil, for example, it was decided by the leading aid agency to opt for a mediation orchestrated by the World Bank Group, with the expectation that the conciliation process, that is convivial, apolitical, neutral, technical, would facilitate both parties, the communities and the company, to reach a win-win solution. So that was the process. Friendly mediation, as it was called, was about to start in order to decide what will happen for the remaining grabbed territory consisting of cultivated fields, reserved forests, sacred hills, etc. So on the one hand, extensive training was given at the village level by NGOs. Some indigenous representatives selected by villagers got technical knowledge of international political and financial economy. But reciprocity did not prevail. That is, NGOs came only rarely to the villages. And one of the guys of the NGO told Frédéric, oh, you know, we are not ethnographers like you. We have the responsibility to educate them and open their eyes to the worldwide scenario, but we are not supposed to meet them too closely and to understand their livelihood and their symbolic views. So after some time, it was clear that the rubber trees that had already been planted and grew well would never be dug out. A few hectares were given back to the villages, places where trees had not yet been planted, with very low fertility and difficult physical access. So the people were not happy because many of their heritage sites, such as cemeteries, places of worship, had not been returned. And secondly, the villagers wanted to recover an integrated territory. But the newly framed territory was now like a patchwork, an inconsistent puzzle full of holes and appropriated portions of land by the company. Such a patchy territory, according to the villagers, made the spirits angry because they have no more sufficient place for freely circulate. Even the spirits who reside in the retroceded hills can get any satisfaction in the absence of trees where they reside. So, as a conclusion, it has been observed that by Frédéric that once the initial moment of mobilization has passed, that is a real struggle, sometimes with violence, the momentum is lost. And the demands activated by supporting NGOs are not strong enough, and the promises made by the company are not kept. Villages organizations became less effective at achieving their demands after being less confrontational. Most of these villages organizations became less operational once they took more conciliatory positions and invested their energies in dialogue rather than really resisting. A last word. This negotiation is no longer a struggle. It has reproduced and reinforced the very structures of oppression the villages intended initially to resist. Concepts of nature and culture as separate entities, the naturalism position of the modern world, have been imported unquestionably. Some historical transnational networks are aware of these risks in South America, for example, Via Campesina. But others don't understand that stakeholder dialogue, consultations, participation can lead to very bitter experiences. So, to conclude, maybe the winner in this negotiation process is not the company who gave back some hectares, it is not the communities, but it is the group of NGOs themselves who got many liaising, many connections in the process with the World Bank and with other funders. They got a lot of money for launching this process, and that's why the author, Frédéric, is very bitter after this research. So he's not here for answering your questions. So I think it will be for the last half an hour, about 30 minutes. The floor is used to ask questions to Marie about the Kosi River in Nepal and Bihar in India, and Christian about nature-culture non-division in Vietnam.
So I have one question to Marie. So first of all, thanks for your presentations, both of them. They were very interesting, and also the paper. So from your presentation, Marie, I've understood that human infrastructure in the communities that you researched increased the impact of floods in the communities. And I was thinking, with climate change, the probability of extreme events will increase drastically, and there's probably, I don't know, in this area there's already strategies how to adapt to these climate change events. And I was thinking maybe one thing that development agencies would think to do is probably to have more human infrastructure to deal with these climate change events. So have you looked into these issues, and how would even more human infrastructure development in the rivers affect the local communities regarding climate change?
Yeah, actually, that's the climate change will augment the rain in the eastern part of the Himalaya, according to the IPCC report. And people are thinking about it, but actually, the World Bank, that is a good indicator to see the development in the world. In the middle of the 1990s, it started to finance big hydro power projects, but there is a revival since 2000 under new arguments. For example, climate proofing, you know, and so they are building up again big dams, you know. So unfortunately, the mainstream approach is not going to change yet in this part of the world. This is not the case in America or in Europe, where the paradigm has a little bit changed in the 1990s.
Myself, I have a question to Christian, following what I read about Frédéric's research in Cambodia. So if you have understood, he has argued that one of the weaknesses of the process launched by the NGOs is that they could not hear, they could not understand the world representation of the indigenous peoples. So considering this, do you think, Christian, or what would you suggest if you were a member of these NGOs? How would you have listened to the demands of the indigenous peoples? How would you have understood their worldviews in order to try maybe to find an agreement, or maybe you would have refused totally the process, which would have been also a choice?
There is different way to answer. There is one very political correct, another one not political correct. Of course, I will show the second one. And because the NGO, they are not here to help the local people. They are here to make a project to get another money, another project to get money. They are in the process to use the one project to get money for another one. It's been usually, in many situations, I have many cases in Vietnam about that. Even the big NGO, the same Oxfam. You know, Oxfam is a very big one, and they are very humanitarian principle. But even them, sometimes they are involved in the projects. For example, there was in the northern Vietnam, in very poor province of Ha Giang, in the Chinese border, and they want to organize the group to manage the water. But in the place, there is so much water. There is water everybody has water, there is water all of the year. It's been nobody want to be involved in the group. And the regime said, why? They are against the project. Your project is against the population, it's different. And they asked us as anthropologists to help them. And the report was, the problem don't come from the local people, it's come from you. And we try to understand why they want to support the group of a water user in the place there is no problem with the water. Because they get the financial support for that. Before they know where they will study. And after the Vietnamese partners say, you will study in this province because you have a contract with the province. It's been the connection between the financial support about the water and the connection with the local partner mixed together. And the NGO have no choice, they put together, but it's not working. And after that, they make a project. And the only objective of them is to have the final report, beautiful one, to say, we have a good result, we make this workshop, this working well. They don't care for the real result in the fieldwork. And why? Because with this final report, they will use this to ask the money for the next project. It's been they are sometimes in jail in this kind of system. It's been, even if they want to do something, sometimes it's difficult for them. And I know because I was some kind of, how do you say, the fireman for the NGO or the group. Because when they come to the mountain, so the project is not working. After they have a 2-year project, after 6 months, nothing is working. People don't want to come to the meeting. And they ask anthropologists, please help us, the project is not working. Because your project is not suitable with the situation. You cannot bring the people in the meeting. And why? Because all the development projects, NGO, national, international, they start to make the project without any knowledge for the local situation. The project is right in the office in New York, Paris, Bangkok, or Hanoi. And after we implement the project completely top down, and after we try to adapt the project with local situation. As anthropologists say, work in another way. You study first, and when you have enough knowledge, you say, with this knowledge, we can try to design the project. Even with a short study, even maybe 2 weeks, 1 month. But it's never the case. I'm sorry. If some people working in NGO, I'm sorry, maybe you feel a little bit stressed about what I say, but maybe there is some different case, but in majority of the situation is like that, because the money is the first things they need to find. And is also the problem for the research without NGO. I think the time, when we are academic, we don't have time. Usually for the anthropology, the only time we have to contribute is for PhD, because we are students. But when you get a job, usually your study is very short. If you want to spend 3 months in one village, you don't have time. Why? Because you need to teach this place, you need to make conference. You stay in the village 2 months, 2 weeks, bye-bye, you come back. But to stay 2 weeks and come back maybe every 2 months is not the same than if you stay 6 months to live with the people. When you stay a long time with them, you have some kind of interaction. I don't know if you know Tim Ingold, he's an anthropologist from UK, and he said, the anthropology is not a science. Anthropology is the way to educate the anthropologist. This means to be anthropologist, you need to spend time with people, and because that will change who we are. And the study comes later.
It reminds me another anthropologist, French anthropologist, Maurice Godelier, who wrote, you need 6 months to understand the village where you live and to write the first results. Then you need 6 months for understanding that everything is wrong. And then you need another period of 6 months to start to have more or less exact data.
Okay. Usually, I think anthropologists. Stand up. Okay. I think anthropologists usually focus a lot on the period of time in which they are staying in a place, but then they don't follow up so much. After that, after they're gone, they don't go back and ask, okay, what's going on now, and follow up on their research. What's your opinion on that?
Yes, it's happened sometimes. The people come in one village for a few years after they never come back. But usually, when you want to study the situation in the time, you come for your PhD, for example, for 2 years full time, and after you write your PhD, you get a job, and you come back in the same village. This means you know the grandfather, the father, the children. After the grandfather died, and you see the children of the grandson. This means you see maybe 4 generations in the same village. This means you have a very deep understanding of the social life, because of course the different generations have different positions, and you see the transformation. But need to take time and need to focus on maybe not 20 different places all over the world. If you focus one place to place, it will be enough. So maybe Marie have the study, how we can study in different places to understand the people, and because I think she's a geographer, but the same practice. I talk as anthropologist, but I think sociologist or geographer can make the same job.
To me, it depends of the finance also. You know, I had to write my PhD, and now I'm looking for a job. And of course, what I'd love to do is going back to the area of my study and continue to work over there. You know, and of course, going in the other part of the world to have a narrative view. But still, my main work will be based over there. If it was the case, I would be more than happy, you know. Yeah. But it's a question of how to do it. You know?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, there should be a mechanism or something to, like, be sure that the research is meaningful. Like, once you've done some research, there should be a mechanism or a bigger project that tries to go back, maybe with other researchers, but, like, in line with what you've done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're talking about the action. Yeah, of course, that's so important. Actually, that's a very good question, you know. Because I haven't heard about that, you know, during these 2 days of conference. You know, not really. You know, people were talking yesterday in the feminist panel of how do we get to the mainstream.
There was a question this morning.
Ah, okay. Yes, sorry. Couldn't sleep. Sorry. But yeah, that's fundamental, you know. We are doing research on very important topics, and you know, that's very important to know how we can get into action without going through NGOs, and we can work with them, but you know, just, yeah, that's very important. But academics generally, you know, I don't know, what do you want to answer for that, Frederick? Do you want to know? Okay, so that's something I ask myself all the time.
The question of the connection between research and action is a very sensitive one, because if you spend more time for action or as activists, maybe your research lose the quality and people don't trust you. They say you are too much involved in the field, and that is this division is very difficult. But in the general situation, when you work in the social and political life of the village, even if you don't want. And because it's like that, it's better to have conscience of that and to know you are an actor in this system, the local system, and you know what you do and you can talk with them like that. It's not possible. Even your position, you come in the village, just like that. You change something in the village.
I know people that are actually doing research and are also in the action, and they are really taken very seriously. Like, for example, I don't know if you heard, but Dinesh Kumar Mishra is working in northern Bihar, and he really has dedicated his whole life to talk about the suffering of the people living over there. And he's an amazing researcher and amazing activist too. So I guess you can combine the two cascades, from my point of view.
Then I have a question to Marie regarding this nature, culture, relationships, etc. What Christian said, do you think that in your field work, the parents of those people or the grandparents of those people, you said that they were accustomed to live with the different levels of water. Do you think they miss the young people? They miss the times where there was no embankment, or are they satisfied that there is some kind of modernity coming to their place, even if they face a lot of problems? Well, they are not neglected. The government is doing something for them. There is some concrete.
Young people didn't know the time when there was no amendments, you know. But old people, very old people in Bihar miss this time, yeah. And they're talking about how it was. They're not talking about a golden age of living with floods, because it was never the case. I mean, if you have so high density in floodplain, it's because, you know, you have also lots of good things coming out from flood. Even if once in 50 years everything can be destroyed. In the Koshi Plain, they have a say that they have a say since probably centuries, saying that in one night Koshi can make you a beggar or a rich man. And the risk was then partly accepted. But before the density and the modification of the space and the privatization of land, people used to move according to the rhythm of the river, you know. So that's the thing. But today, of course, it's not possible anymore. And I'm not preaching for going back to this age and destroying everything. I think we should build a bridge and find in-between situation, you know, yeah, and give the voice to the locals because they know their environment.
Just for conclusion, I think what you say is the expression of the technical, political domination by the expert and by the state on this kind of population. But we know they have some kind of knowledge of local management of that, but nobody tried to record that. Nobody tried to know what they know. And it was possible to mix together. Of course, they cannot build a big dam and kind of this, but maybe locally they have some kind of knowledge. And if we can maybe manage the dam to work with them, it will be better for both. But the problem, there is a hierarchy in the knowledge, and the knowledge is power. Foucault talk about that. It's the state and the expert, they have in their hand the power of science and the political power. And the farmer, we think they don't have that. It's the reason why we impose them in this kind of situation. And that is the case in many situations. It maybe is more clear in India, in Europe. I think the system in America, the political system makes this more soft. But the process is the same. It's more...
But actually, people are working on the local knowledge, like this researcher I was talking about, Dinesh Kumar Mishra, actually. That's one big part of his work, to show the local knowledge of the people. But, yeah. And the experts actually apply a model from America that are not even... That's why I have a very long part of the physical geography. I'm a geographer, I'm sorry, but I wanted you really to understand the very extreme environmental background, you know, because that's fundamental, you know, there is so much sedimentation in this river. If you apply, they apply an equation, the equation of Lassay, it's adapted to the river in North America, and it's crazy, you know, that's what Forsyth calls the environmental orthodoxy, you know, that it's exactly fitting in, you know, so that's... But the problem is, today, most of the people rely on the embankments, and they believe, because they have been taught that, and generally they're not educated, in all these parts, 80% of the people didn't go to school, they have to work at 10 years old, they go to migration, they have to work in the field, their life is quite difficult. And so they believe like engineers and experts, they know better, and they believe embankments are. It depends, because I had to go very quickly because of the 20 minutes of the conference. But the first example I show in Tilati, it's a very exceptional case in Terai, because it was a very cultural center, but otherwise Terai was kept under-educated and with no infrastructure till 1951. And the other example, just after in Narsing, it was totally the opposite. It was the poorest part in Terai, actually, and you can see the difference of thinking, In Tilati, people are making their own embankment, and they say stop to the post-flood relief system of the state, because they don't want to be beggars, they want true solution. But at the opposite, in the other village, the people I made, like when I make an activity with a map, and I was talking about the embankment on the other side, so another village, just in front of their village, and everybody started to become crazy and say, how can we talk about this village? And so I just realized that their way of seeing the management of flood and water was totally, partitioned, Exactly like the management, like these small structures that there is no global views, So that's where a lot of problem emerges,
And this morning in this room, one presenter talked about the difficulty of communication between two communities from the Thai government and Germany. Another one is the local authority in the Nam province in the extreme northern Thailand, the Lao border. And we have the same situation. For you it's extreme because they are farmers, they are illiterate, but here it was the administration of one province in Thailand. People, they have education, they have training, but even that, they cannot communicate with the expert for the climate change. Because the expert comes with a frame from Germany. And they don't understand what they want, don't understand what they do, don't understand the objective. And it was the two words separately, and they have big problem to communicate. And I'm sure the conclusion of the report will be, people understand nothing of the project, they don't want to participate of the project. It's true. The question is why? Why they don't participate? And the foreign or the state experts never ask themselves, why we act like this with people who don't have the same background than us? This is the first question you must ask. And if you ask that, say you have a reflexive analysis on yourself, say, oh, I do that, but what is the consequence of what I do on the people I have connected with? And if you start to ask like this, everything become more easy. But you need to be outside the system of scientific and political domination. That is the first problem we need to solve.
I have a question. Sorry. Just, is there any, has it been studies about all the failures that you're talking about, all the misunderstanding between NGOs and local authorities or villages? Where can we find books or literature about it? Has it been research? This, like what you were talking about, the German and the Nan province. Is there a summary of the projects that have been failed, and is there any conclusion or reflection? Where can we find that? Do we have to go project by project on the internet, or is there someone who has studied widely all this problem?
Yeah, you're sure. I think your question is very large and it's very difficult to answer in short time. But I think the problem, if you study in India, in Thailand, in Vietnam, probably in China, maybe in Brazil the same, I think what you say is the group of people with some community, they have a power. And they have a power to impose the power for other people. And even... Only one book about
Yeah,
that?
like a book or someone, anthropologist who has studied all the different.
No, we have a case studies. But one book had.
No, no.
Alternative?
I have a book in mind, but it is in French by Georges Rossi, L'ingérence écologique, environnement et développement rural du nord au sud. This book has been contested, criticized, everything is not maybe true, but I think it's quite fascinating, and it's a lot about the prejudices of the experts, etc., how farmers are accused to create erosion in the Himalaya.
I try to find it. Thank you.
Yeah, but this book is out of print. So you can download on the illegal website, probably for free. We'll see what do.
And David Mossy, the British anthropologist, I think he wrote about this.
For Laos, there has been a book written by, I don't know, I forget, it's many years ago, in the 90s, all the project that has been conducted by French, I don't know which one, organist, and all the misunderstanding you are talking about, it's exactly that. It's very interesting. An agricultural project, in Laos. I forgot the name of the organist, but Laos, they cooperate with Laos and try to train agronomists, teachers at agriculture schools, but the salaries of the Lao people are not the same as the French expert who come, you know. So they have no time to do all the job they're asked to do. Very interesting book.
When we start to looking for this kind of topic, there is a risk, because you can find quickly the denunciation. You say the NGO, they do bad job, something. It's not true. See, they try to do something, but they are in the process, and the job of the scholars of academic is try to understand what is the process. They are not free. For example, the difference between Vietnam and Thailand. In Vietnam, the NGO never have the direct action in the village. They must give all the action for the local farmer union or woman union. They belong to Communist Party in Vietnam. In Thailand, if you are NGO, you can work directly with the farmer. It's very, very different. Since we cannot stamp the NGO as some kind of, they make a bad job or trouble. They try to do something. But inside the process of the NGO, many of them, I talked before about Oxfam. Oxfam is a very big one, and you can, very famous, so we can respect Oxfam. But also, they have this idea, they are here to save the world. And that's the problem, because they are so convinced of what they do. We cannot explain for them, we cannot talk with them. God exists or not, it's impossible to talk with them. If you talk with the NGO, they make development project, you think the development is a really good thing, 100%? They don't want to listen about that. They say, no, it's the same. For them it's God, development is God. You cannot analyze God, cannot analyze development.
Maybe it's more related to the previous one. Like if you need to spend so many time when you are like looking, going to research a new area, and what do you think is the advantage of a foreigner researcher?
Yes and not, because when you are foreigner, people think you are stupid, you know nothing, and it's a good thing to learn. Because if, for example, I am Thai in Thailand, and I talk with a farmer, they suppose I know many things about the rice, but everything. If I am foreigner, even if I know, I can play, I know nothing, and I learn from them. This is a game like that. But the more difficult is there is many things natural in the behavior. For me, they will be completely strange, but for the maybe Thai people in Thailand, will be natural. You know, this interaction can be difficult. But usually the anthropologists use that to be foreigner some ways as a tools. Because, for example, in the community, of course you will have a place in the community if you stay 1 year in one village, after you be member of the community. But you are a foreigner, member of the community, you are not a full member of the community. Usually you have more freedom to play, or if you make one mistake, people they don't they are not so hard with you because they can understand, okay, you're not from here, maybe you don't speak the language very well, maybe no. You have the more flexible position.
Okay, so I think it's time for tea and coffee. Thank you for your collaboration.